Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. My guest today, Maria Keffler, is here to talk about a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and sadly, probably every one of you watching is affected by the current phenomena of people who transition supposedly to the opposite gender, though we all know that that's not humanly possible. She is the owner of a 501(c)(3), but is here specifically to talk about her newest book called Desist, Detrans, and Detox. And I am very excited to talk about this. So without really further ado, and I'm sorry, Maria, I didn't give you too much more of a bio. That is rich, that this topic has caused you to open up Advocates Protecting Children.org, a 501(c)(3).
Mhm.
And we've got to save people. So can I just start with saying thank you for writing this book? Um, and then say, why on earth did you write this? What caused you to go dig so deeply into this book that is touching all of us?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be able to come and talk to you about it. Yeah, this phenomenon is just horrific. And I'll tell you, I got invited to a policy meeting at my local school district. I'm in Arlington, Virginia. This was 5 years ago now, a little more than that. And a friend of mine called me. She said, Maria, I was looking around the school website for some information about summer school, and I came across this transgender student policy working meeting. I want to go. I don't want to go alone. Will you go with me? So we went to this meeting. And I'm an educator. I was a stay-at-home mom for almost 20 years, but I taught school prior to that. I'm teaching school again now that my kids are older. And sitting around the table were about a dozen people talking about what they wanted to see in policy around transgender identified students. I always say transgender identified because I don't believe someone can be
Correct.
transgender. And I know that's maybe splitting hairs for a lot of people, but I
No,
want
my
to lay that
PhD
down.
is in communication. Language is essential. He
It
who
is.
owns
It
the
is.
language owns the message. And you're going to get into this because I know it's in your book, but just speaking about the word gender, our
Mhm.
grandparents didn't really subtract gender from sex. And
Right,
that,
right.
anyway, so no,
Yeah.
you go ahead and split hairs.
Okay. So they're talking about what they want to see in these policies. And the scary takeaway from the evening for me was that they consider parents to be a threat. And the head of counseling for Arlington Public Schools said if the parents aren't quite there yet, meaning if parents don't jump on board with affirming transgender identities and believing that boys can become girls and girls can become boys, it's the school's job to, she said, help them along. And until then, if the parents are not on board, that kids need to be protected from these parents. I went away from that meeting absolutely gobsmacked. As an educator, my master's is in educational psychology. So as I started researching this, I'm like, I can think of 15 reasons off the top of my head why a kid might feel confused in today's culture, especially with all of the misinformation, disinformation that's out there, and everybody knows somebody who's going through this. I have dear friends who their kids are going through this, and just starting to research, seeing what was going on, what was happening in the schools, seeing parents being cut off from their children, pediatricians telling parents you have to affirm if your child says they're trans, all these lies that were out there. And I kept asking, who's writing something for parents? Because my organization, before I was part of starting Advocates Protecting Children in Arlington, we started the Arlington Parent Coalition, trying to push back in the school district. That organization is still going strong. And we had all these parents reaching out to us. My child said he is trans. My daughter said she's actually a boy. What do we do? What do we do? And we started trying to put together what are some best practices? What do we know from educational psychology? What do we know from common sense? What do we know from good time-tested parenting? How to respond to this? And we put out a small pamphlet about 5 pages, and it was really, really well received. And it just more and more people were accessing it, asking for help. And I kept saying, who's going to put a book out for parents? Who's writing this? Nobody was
And
writing.
God said, "You are."
Yeah. This is not what I ever wanted to be known for, God. But yeah, I felt like parents are needing help with this, and I hate to ever say I'm some sort of an expert in parenting, but I'm looking at what's happening in the culture. I'm seeing what lies are out there. And I'm like, I thought I'm going to write a book and probably a year, maybe a year and a half, somebody else, either this is all going to go away because people are going to wake up from the lie, or somebody else is going to come out, somebody has better credentials than I do with, a better book. Well, the book's been out. We published it ourselves through Advocates Protecting Children in 2021. So it's been now 3.5 years. Sophia reached out, Sophia Institute Press, and said, "This is the book that we need. Can we republish this?" And so they have republished it under their imprint. And it's shocking to me that it's still needed. And it's heartbreaking that every time we make a sale of this book, I know it's another family who's going through this nightmare. So that's how I got involved, and it was not something I was ever looking for, but obviously God put me in the right places, gave me the right background, and just put me in that meeting at the right time to try
Yeah,
to help people who are going through this.
absolutely. And you're a mover and a shaker. So there's a lot of people going through it, but they sometimes don't have the vision or the abilities or the confidence. And so, yeah, thank God that you do, that you can see what is needed. Because I always needed people like you as
Mm.
well. It's like I'd sit there and I'd know things, but I didn't know how to organize them or how to mobilize necessarily. So,
Well,
yeah, thank you for doing
I
that.
was never an activist by nature. Again, this is not what I expected to be doing with this part of my life. But my friend really, she's the one who started Arlington Parent Coalition and said, we've got to push back against this. And the more we pushed back, the more of the tsunami we saw and what's happening. And,
Yeah.
you can't sit back and ignore it. It's not going to go away.
No, I was so grateful when my own children who lived up in Alexandria there. I'm in Virginia Beach, a little bit south of
Oh,
you.
okay.
They lived up there and the Loudon school district had their heinous, that's the one where the girl was raped by the transgender boy, or the boy who
Hmm.
called himself a girl, and then he did it twice, and they arrested the father for defending his daughter at a school board meeting, among other things.
Yeah.
And
You
it
know
was,
what's interesting about that? I have friends who were there. Now, I know you have to be careful with he said, she said, and hearsay, but I have good friends who were there at that school board meeting. And they said that dad was there just trying to talk to the school board. And there were people who were baiting him,
oh.
saying things like calling his daughter a tramp and trying to bait him and make him angry. And those people disappeared when the police showed up. So, yeah, it's this stuff.
It's diabolical at its core.
That's a
And
perfect
a
word.
little bit off the subject before we go back. It's not really off the subject, but are you familiar with the Communist Manifesto?
Yeah,
And one of the
a little
things, one of
bit.
the
Yeah.
rules of the Communist Manifesto, so they want to start communism, they want to infiltrate America. And one of the very clear rules is, well, get into the education system, but
Hmm.
divide parents from children. So they want to put children in kindergarten. That's why kindergarten developed and now pre-K, and they want to get as many women working and put your children in daycare so they
Hmm.
can start indoctrinating the children early. And no
Yeah.
one wants to hear that word, but I always thought that was make believe people over in Russia when I was growing up. But this is really part of a communist takeover to try to separate your child from you, my child from me. And
Yeah.
we've got to see that. But putting all of that aside, we still have heartbroken moms and dads who love their children
Yeah.
and they want to help them and they know their kids are confused. I mean, kids are allowed to be confused. It's a crazy world out there.
Hmm.
So please start, Maria. What you want us to desist? You want us to detrans? Well, let's start with the desisting. Where do we start?
Yeah, it's a big question. Um, First of all, I really want to impress upon people that this is a cult. The book is called Desist, Detrans, and Detox, Getting Your Child Out of the Gender Cult. And we put that word in there very specifically. I know it seems like a kind of sensationalized word, but it's really not. Cults have 8 things that they do, and trans hits every single one of them. This is a cult. It has been seeded in the schools. It is being seeded through social media. When you get a child who has said, I'm trans, I'm non-binary, whatever, they've been taken into a cult and you have to treat it as such. And there are strategies for deprogramming. And that's really what the book is about. It's about deprogramming your child, but it's not quick. It's not easy. It takes a long time. It's a long game that you're playing. When we talk to parents, everyone wants the silver bullet. What's the thing I need to say or do that's going to make this nightmare stop right now? And I don't know anybody who's gotten their child back who did it quickly. We're talking probably 10 months, a
Minimum.
year and a half, 3 years. It also depends on the situation you're in. If this is a child who's under 18, you have a lot more power. If you have a child who's over 18, it's much harder because you don't have the control over the finances anymore. We do tell people that the vectors driving this are public school, smartphones, and social media. Kids should not have smartphones. I don't think anyone under the age of 16 should have a smartphone. In our family, we said you can get a smartphone when you can pay for it, and not just for the phone, but for the monthly fees. And so that means our kids aren't getting phones until they're getting part-time jobs.
Yeah.
So that pushes it off a bit. One of our kids still has a flip phone. It's what she wants. She's 19. She's like, I don't want to have a smartphone. I don't want to get sucked into it. Flip phones are great. They do the job. You can text, you can call. That's all you need. Social media, I don't think anybody under 18 should have social media. And I'm right on the edge of saying I don't think anyone over 18 should have it
Yeah.
either
I
because
pulled off of it.
it's a terrible, unregulated place. And it breaks my heart to tell people to pull their kids out of public school because I trained and licensed as a public school teacher. I was a proponent of the public schools until 2019 when I saw what was happening there. And I can't, in good conscience, tell man or beast to go take part in the public school system. There are some wonderful teachers out there. I'm not trying to vilify all teachers.
Correct.
But it's a system that is systematically destroying your children and your family. And
And
as
those
you,
good teachers, the good
Mhm.
teachers that either get put out or fight it or silenced. So yes, there are some amazing teachers. But we
Yeah.
saw that with when the COVID hit and you
Mhm.
saw people having to go on school online. And I'm sure you've seen the same videos I have of the teacher, that male teacher is one I'm thinking of, is like, well, you're going to have ears listening. So parents are there. So you're going to have to curtail what you say. Well, why? Why do you have
Right.
to curtail what you're telling my child? Because I'm listening. And
Yeah.
that was
Aren't you
really
just teaching
hard.
math? Shouldn't you be teaching just English, science? Yeah, but we know that many of them are not just teaching those subjects.
Yeah, so I am a fan with you. Although I will say, and I'm a devout Catholic, anybody who watches my show knows that. But in some Catholic schools, you're even having them have the gender conversation. I'm like, excuse me, that goes against the Catholic faith, but it's infiltrated there as well. And
Yeah.
not all of the Catholic schools, not the ones that stay true to the Catholic faith, but
Hmm.
those that have weakened their grip and just are like, well, we're gonna anyway. So I mean, it seems homeschooling, which has shot up. I recently said 11%, and someone said to me 400% of people since COVID, 400% increase. I
Yeah.
don't know what
Yeah.
the accurate numbers are, but
Yeah, I don't know the actual numbers right now either, but COVID was a big boon for homeschooling. We started homeschooling a year before COVID, pulled our kids, different purpose, different reason that we did that. And so when COVID hit, we just kept right on going. It was very seamless. My kids, they were like, this is amazing. Nothing
yeah.
has changed really for us. I think homeschooling is a great thing for families to do. I realize not everybody can do it.
Sure.
Um, it's a financial commitment. That's one of the things the public schools, they're free. So, they offer a service and it's hard for a lot of families to pull. But I really encourage if there's any way, if it takes downsizing, if it takes cutting back on other things,
Yeah, but
your
if your kids aren't in
children,
school, there are benefits too. And I guess we're getting off the topic because homeschooling is great, but the kids don't have
right?
to compete with
We
other
did.
kids. You don't have to have school clothes. You don't have to have. But so, yes, this is a cult
Mhm.
and we need to identify it as such. But once we've done that, Maria, what do we do? I mean, okay, it's a cult, but my kid's still in it.
Yeah. Again, the first thing to do, if you're able, get out of the public school, take away the smartphone, take away the social media. Every parent should have control over those things.
You will
If
be
your
hated
child
for a
has a
time, but
Yeah, if your child has an unregulated phone or social media that you don't have the passwords for, you need to do something about that. You need to be able to take those things away. Um, the main strategies for pulling a child out are to try to get their loyalty back. Once a child's been sucked in, or anyone's been sucked into a cult, their loyalty goes with the cult. And that's what has happened here. Your child's loyalty is no longer with the family. It's primarily with the cult. The cult is telling the child, if your family doesn't agree with your transgender identification, they're hateful, they're bigoted, they're transphobic, they don't love you. And all of those lies you need to fight with truth, right? That we have. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth,
right.
and the life. And we need truth coupled with love. And so we need to be speaking truth to the child, but also with love. You want to try to cut off the bad influences, the cult influences. I say where they're getting the trans juice, public school, smartphone, social media, cut off everything you can. The aunt or uncle who's affirming it, you may have to curtail that relationship for a while. You're trying to put a hedge of protection around your child and surround the child with truth, with love, with honesty, with the facts. And it's a long process of slowly asking questions, trying to engage the child's logic, showing the child that, hey, we're a family. We love you. We're going to love you no matter what. We don't agree with this because we haven't seen anything that convinces us that a man can become a woman or vice versa. There are some strategic questions that you can ask that get to the heart of the illogic of this. But that's the long game. It's cutting off the unhealthy influences, surrounding the child with healthy influences, working on the relationship, and trying to apply logic to get the child to see where he or she has been misled.
Do you think that this is an accidental thing? Because I know that this is a contagion, a social contagion. And I actually have my answer in my mind. I'm kind of baiting you. Or do you
Mm.
think people on social media are intentionally going after kids, intentionally looking for the weak link and trying to persuade them differently? What are your thoughts on that?
They are absolutely looking for kids to pull into this, not just on social media, but in the schools. I've had parents tell me, a friend of mine went to a theater meeting. It was for local schools and community theater groups. And at that, it was supposed to be, diversity, equity, inclusion. And my friend is a Black woman, and she said she thought it was going to be about breaking down racial stereotypes and getting various races onto the stage in plays. She said the whole evening was about homosexuality and trans. She said the person who was giving the training was telling directors, go to the lunchroom and see who's sitting by themselves.
Oh,
Go to the halls, see who's at their lockers by themselves. That's who you can talk to get them into the GSA club, the Gender Sexuality Allies Club. We heard, and I cannot remember her name. She was a school counselor in California. Her name eludes me at the minute, but I have a link to her saying, we know that the kids who are running the GSA club, we poached them from the counseling department. They weren't the most stable kids on campus. In fact, they were the least stable kids on campus. They know they're doing this. There are influencers on social media, and I don't want to give their names because I don't want to give them any more advertisement. But these are guys who say these are adult men who say that they're women or that they're non-binary, and they are putting out videos that say your parents don't love you if they don't agree with your trans identification. You can come and be with me. I love you. It's very hypnotic and it's very it's grooming. It's sexual
It's
grooming.
predatorial.
It
You can
is
say that word.
predatory. Yeah, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So absolutely, they're out there. And people ask me why. Why would anyone do this? Well, one reason, there are multi-tentacles to this, but one big reason is it's a huge moneymaker. I've been saying for a few years, the market reports, companies will do market reports on a new trend, like, oh, we've got this new kind of clothing item and how much can we expect to make off this clothing item? We'll put out a market report for businesses that want to make that clothing item and try to sell it. What can you expect? There are market reports out there on sex reassignment surgery. Just sex reassignment surgery, just genital surgeries, is expected to be a 1.5 billion with a B dollar industry by 2026. Now, other people have been telling me that my information is old and it's actually much bigger than that now. It's a bigger
I was
number.
going to say,
But
I'm actually
3 years
surprised.
ago, they were projecting 1.5 billion by 2026. Now I'm told it's actually much more than that. And that doesn't include the hormones that the pharmaceutical companies are making money hand over fist, and the euphemistic top surgery, which is when they do a double mastectomy on a healthy girl's breasts, which they're doing as young as 12, by the way. People don't believe me when I say that, but Joanna Olson Kennedy, she is a doctor in California. She has a grant from the National Institute of Health. You can look this up for doing these surgeries, and right in her grant, she says she's doing them as young as 12, and she's pushing to go down as low as 8, 8 years old, cutting off a
Makes me
girl's
want to
breasts.
vomit. Makes
It's
me want to
evil.
vomit. 8 years
It,
old hasn't even developed her breasts yet. What are you doing with that skin? What are you taking out?
it's horrific.
It's
It's absolutely horrific.
diabolical. And they
Hmm.
don't tell these kids the truth. I mean, just talking about the surgeries, you will not see it. I've talked to many people, as many as I can. I'll say it again now. Do you understand what they do in your for the bottom surgery? For a female,
Hmm.
for instance, to get a fake phallus, they
Hmm.
slice the flesh off of her forearm
Yep.
forever. It will never be there. And she will wear a band on this arm. This arm is skinnier, near to the
Yeah.
bone than this arm. So they can take that flesh and recreate a fake instrument that will never climax.
Oh, it
That these,
doesn't work.
that
No,
doesn't work.
they have to put a pump in it for her to physically pump it up if she wants
But
to use it.
that's just an erection. What
Yeah.
I tell people, let's just get rid of all morality. Let's get rid of all morality. Let's talk about the sins of the flesh. You will
Mm,
never again have a climax. You will be as if you're stimulated close to climax and you're stuck there. I mean,
yeah.
to me, that would drive any person insane. But they
Yeah.
will not tell this to them. You're going to be so sexually frustrated. And that's not even counting, Maria, the pain, the physical pain, because
Mm.
these girls, Chloe Cole, who had her breasts removed when she was 15, I believe,
15.
15,
Yeah.
she still has pain
Hmm.
now. She's detransitioned. She said she still has pain all around her breast area.
Yeah.
And God bless that young lady
Hmm.
for speaking out.
It's horrific what is happening to kids, and the doctors absolutely don't tell them the truth. And you know what else Joanna Olson Kennedy says? She's caught on tape saying this. If a girl wants breasts again, she can go and get them. No, synthetic breasts, you can't breastfeed with them. They don't have any nerve endings. You're not
Well,
going to
let's
have
forget
full
about the
sex
pain. We
action
just
from
talked
them.
about Chloe Cole. Once you slice breasts off, you put something in, you're severing nerve endings. You're
Yeah.
causing extreme pain. Or
Yeah.
this diabolical when the boys, they want to have a boy transition into a girl, and they're doing that younger and younger. The better success of keeping that fake vaginal opening is based on the larger the penis, the better, because they slice the penis, peni, whatever you say, turn it
Mhm.
inside out basically. But if these boys are getting gender puberty blockers and their penises never grow, they're
Mhm.
slicing the small amount of material that as they grow
Yeah, that's
rips.
what happened to Jazz Jennings, that poor young man whose mother started transing him at the youngest of ages. And he talked about, he refers to himself as a she. I refer to him as a he. He was
I
born a boy. He
agree.
always will be a boy despite what they've done to him. That he basically split in half after the surgeries, had multiple surgeries trying to repair. And we know you don't get better than what God gave you at birth. Nothing, nothing that we do ever approximates nature. God, what he gave us. These surgeries are horrific. They are
But
nightmarish.
they're
I
money
heard,
makers.
oh, they are huge money makers.
What
They are
did you
huge
say you heard?
money
What
makers.
before I cut you off?
One young man who detransitioned after having these surgeries, he said, I had Frankenstein surgeries. He said, I look like Frankenstein down there, what they've done to me. And he was a teenager. It's what's really diabolical. Do you remember being 13, 14, 15, 16 years old?
Yes,
Did
as my
you
breasts
love
were
life?
developing, as my
Did
body
you
was changing, and
did you just feel like everything was cool and you had it all together? Puberty was no problem and
no.
relationships were no problem and friendship. No, that's a messy time of life. Every single one of us struggles through that time. Who am I? People don't like me. Do they like me? What's wrong with me? How do I get along in life? We all struggled, and this industry is preying
Taking
on
advantage of them.
kids right at the
Yeah.
time where they are most vulnerable. That's why I call this a cult. They're preying on the most vulnerable
And they
people in
don't
society.
care. They use that lie that they're suicidal when the statistics are suicide increases after these surgeries. I've
Yeah.
heard one, oh my gosh, I could cry just thinking about the pain. And I've seen some of these detransitioners and their panels and things that they've talked about that the mainstream media won't publicize. It's like I have
Mhm.
to fight every day to not want to jump off of a bridge, because when I realize I can never undo this,
Yeah.
this one young man was like, I'm going to lose my mind. And I
Yeah.
have to somehow just focus on getting through this day and
Hmm.
not looking at the monster I've become. I can't
Yeah.
even comprehend that.
No, to do that to a child, I mean, I went to a dentist one time. I just picked her because she was close by. I'd never had a cavity. I was in my early 30s, and she told me that all four of these teeth had cavities and needed to be drilled. And I just trusted her because I'd never had a bad dentist. I wish so much that I had gotten a second opinion because I've had nothing but trouble with these teeth. I've got crowns on several of them now. I have lain awake at night thinking how stupid I was to let her damage my good, perfect teeth.
It's so
And
funny to say
and
that. I
I
feel the
think,
same way about my
and
wisdom teeth.
yeah. And now, but then I think these poor kids who this is their reproductive system. These are their breasts. This is their penis. And I think about how crazy that has made me just over four teeth that can be
Yes.
fixed to some degree. I can still eat and chew. But what has been done to these
Right.
kids?
And if you're abused, physically abused or emotionally abused, you don't see that 10 years later. You can still feel pain, right?
Mhm.
The pain of the abuse. You have to work through that.
Yeah.
But it's inside and it can be hidden. For these kids, they have to physically look at this temple, their bodies, and they can't even avoid it when they try to have a positive attitude, try to pretend they weren't abused as a child 10 years ago or 15 or 30 years ago. They
Yeah.
have to look at it every day. And I just can't even comprehend that.
I
I
know. And
can't.
parents, oh gosh, this is why we're so adamant. Do the hard thing now. Yes, pulling them out of public school is hard. Taking away the smartphone and the social media is going to make them angry, but you are saving them from that. You are saving them from a future of devastation and pain and regret. Do the hard thing now to protect them later.
About 20 years ago, I heard Dr. James Dobson was talking when they came up with those hate speech laws. He said, they're going to abuse it. 'Cause it sounded really good back then. It's like, oh, yeah, don't let someone hate. He's like, no, they're going to twist it, which they did. And then now you see these TV commercials all over the place about anti-bullying. Don't
Mm,
bully. Well, in your book, you actually talk about the role of bullying and peer
mhm.
pressure in this gender cult
Yeah.
because it tries to make it look like they're protecting. But so speak to that.
Yeah, well, if you don't agree with it, no matter who you are, parent, sibling, just another teacher at school, if you don't agree with it, you will be bullied. You will be canceled. You will be, lose your job. But I'm thinking about like what happens to siblings. A brother or sister, especially if it's an older brother or sister, says he or she is transgender, non-binary, and will threaten. I've heard this multiple times from kids. My older brother said if I don't call him a she, he'll tell everybody I suck my thumb at night. Or, one girl said her sister threatened to hold her under the pool, under the water at the pool if she didn't call her the preferred name in front of the other kids at the pool. I mean, that's bullying. And kids who are in the trans cult are taught to bully. They're taught. I had online, I have a little knitting and crochet business, and there was a woman that I saw on social media and some of my knitting and crochet groups, and I invited her to join another little group I had. Well, she looked me up apparently and saw that I believe that sex is binary and you can't change sex, and she didn't like that. And she sent me some of the nastiest, nasty grams on social media in public. Well, she took a picture of her two daughters, apparently twins. I think they were about 13 at the time, all dolled up in trans and homos pride gear and trans flags and all that. Apparently, one is lesbian and one is trans at 13,
Oh, so proud
with
of them. So
with
proud.
their middle fingers up to me, and she took a picture of this and pointed and posted it on social media. So this is what you teach your kids, that somebody who disagrees with you flip them off in public on social media. I mean,
Well, that's
and
also part of the Communist manifesto is when you don't have a logical argument, name call.
mhm,
It's written in there. When
yeah,
you always defer to name calling so that you can get them to start defending and
yeah,
staying away from the truth, which is what this
right,
bully cult does.
right. It's absolutely bullying. Um, they're taught it and they do it, and there are ways, to fight back against that. But one is to be aware of it. When someone starts calling you names, it's because they don't have a good argument anymore. Another thing the cult really likes to use is false dichotomy. Um, Either this or that. If you
Right,
don't agree that people can be trans, you hate trans kids.
right.
If you don't let boys use the girls' bathroom, you don't let them use the bathroom at all. You're saying they're not allowed to use the bathroom. Those are false dichotomies. There's a lot of other options in there,
Yeah.
but they will throw a lot of those false dichotomies out. When you hear those things, ask yourself, are those really the only two options? Are those really the only two options? Most of the time, they're not. People won't let trans kids play sports. You see that in the magazines, the media all the time.
Yeah, they're
So
welcome to play
untrue.
sports
Everybody's allowed to
everywhere.
play sports. Everybody's
Just
allowed to
play
play
with your
sports. We're
gender.
asking that they play on the team with other people of the same sex.
Yes.
That's what we're asking.
Now, what's the difference between using the word sex and gender? That's in the book as well.
It is. Until the 1960s, the word gender was a linguistic term. It was used in languages where nouns have gender. So Latin does that, French, Spanish. I just learned Macedonian. We don't have that in English, but in French, which I studied in college, um, the word table, table, is feminine. So you say la
Right.
table. Um,
Right.
but a book, livre, is masculine. So le livre, so le or la, masculine or feminine. That's what gender meant, whether a noun was a masculine or feminine or a neuter noun. John Money, a psychologist in the
Oh, don't
60s,
get me started on
pretty
him.
notorious
Evil
for some
man.
of his abuses, he borrowed that word and started applying it to people. And for most of my life, up until this trans cult thing hit, I used the words interchangeably, as most people did. You get a form from the doctor, it says, what's your gender, male or female? And we understood that was synonymous with your
Sex.
sex, the sex, the sex that you were born. dichotomy, male, female. But the gender cult has taken that word. It has no meaning. It really has no meaning. Gender identity. What is gender identity? Ask somebody that, and you will get a word, you'll get a definition that has gender in it. Well, it's how you feel about your gender. No, any fourth grader who's been through an English class can tell you you can't use a word in the definition of the word you're trying to define.
Right. Like love
And
is love.
right.
Right.
Yeah, good example. Great example. What does that even mean? It means nothing. So gender identity means nothing. It's how you feel about whether you are masculine or feminine. It really refers to personality, your preferences and personality. What colors do you like? What activities do you like? We have fought against regressive sex-based stereotypes for so long, and that, you know what? Girls can play sports and still be girls.
And
And
boys
you
can like pink and
and
ballet
boys,
and still
I
be a
have
boy.
exactly. I have a cousin, a male cousin who dances ballet. He's phenomenal. He's so good. And you know what? He's a flaming heterosexual man. He's married to a woman, never, he can be a man and dance the
Yeah.
ballet.
And that is
But
part of how the
now,
cult does it, Maria. They get you and it's like, oh, you like pink, you must need to sleep with men too. And I'm
yep,
saying it very quickly, but that is actually part of it. I have this argument with my daughters all the time. It's like,
yep,
oh no, because I remember so and so when we lived in Italy, he always liked playing with dolls and the girls and wore pink and he was very feminine. I'm like, but then that didn't mean he had to sleep with boys. There is
right.
also that additional information giving go, you were this way, and they start questioning it. I've had plenty of
Mhm,
people on my show, and they've talked
mhm,
about this, that someone
yeah.
starts putting these ideas in, and then you start thinking, and then it's
Mhm,
this self-fulfilling prophecy and the
exactly.
psychology that gets you thinking, oh, maybe they're right. Because as you said, when I'm 13, 14, 15, what do I know?
Right.
And you trust
I
the expert.
remember I was probably in seventh grade when I heard the word lesbian for the first time and I learned what that was. And I remember in that moment thinking, I wonder if I'm a lesbian. And then I thought about girls and I thought about boys. I was like, no, I really like boys. But today, that's everywhere on the walls. It's cooler to be a lesbian. The pride flags are on the walls. I took a walk in my kids' junior high and high school before I pulled to homeschool. Nobody gets more real estate on the walls and doors than the gay and lesbian and transgender stuff. The
Yeah.
pride and the trans stuff is everywhere. Today, if I ask that question, I wonder if I might be a lesbian.
Your
It's
5-year-old would know that answer.
everywhere. It's not just affirmed, it's applauded and they're taught. And you know what's really, a lot of things are insidious, but one of the insidious things, they say we've got to teach kids young about this in case that's who they really are, so they feel affirmed. Well, you know how they teach a 6 or 7 or an 8-year-old about homosexuality? They'll say, if you are a girl and you like girls more than you like boys, that means you're gay. Or if you're a boy and you like boys more than you like
Right. And
girls.
when they're that age, they do like that gender. They like playing with the kids that are just like them.
Exactly, exactly. And I remember when my daughter was in school, she told me she was in sixth grade and named a friend of hers. I'll call her
Georgia.
Brianna.
Okay,
Um,
Brianna.
and she said, "Oh yeah, Brianna is bisexual." And okay, the mandatory reporter in me rose up and I was like, "Is Brianna having sex with someone?" And she said, no, no, no. She just knows that she likes boys and girls equally. Like, that's friendship. First of all, if you're not having sex, you're not sexual, period. And that is friendship. And I see this all the time with young kids. They do not know the difference between friendship and romance because it's been obscured intentionally.
Yes.
It's this nefarious.
It really is. I was 12 years old before I knew how babies were made, and I went to high school when I went from my Catholic grade school to my public high school, and they had the mandatory sex ed came in and they brought the banana in and they showed you how to do. I had no idea. We made jokes of it. We all started talking about it. It became a thing. With
Yeah.
prior to then, they're like, well, you need to know how. No, we really don't. We
Mm.
just need to know how the body operates. When you get married for millennia, you figure it out on your honeymoon night because the
Yeah.
body is made, the attraction is made, the parts just know what
Mm.
to do. Just tell me what causes pregnancy. Tell me about the egg and the sperm. Tell me about ovum. Tell me about stages.
Yeah.
But they purpose, and that was part of this diabolical movement back in the 60s, 70s. Get the sex ed in there, make it sound, so you can protect them. But actually, that's when sexual relationships outside of marriage increased. People
Mhm.
weren't having sex outside of marriage at a large percentage. Of course, all of history, right? But it was 1, 2, 3%. But then
Mhm.
when that happened, the virgin was the outsider, and
Mhm.
the girls and boys having sex were the
Yeah, I really,
norm.
I never really thought about this until recently, and I know we're getting off topic, but
Well,
again,
but
this
this
is
is
the
going to make people buy the book
multi-principle.
because it's
Um,
exactly.
the birth control pill, that revolutionized sex because you could have, I keep using air quotes, but sex without consequence. And that's the thing that really opened the door to the sexual
She just
revolution.
became Catholic. That is the biggest fight. Still, the Catholic Church, people, Catholics say no birth control. They think it's just some random rule that some pope came up with. It said, no, when you start taking the boundaries off and putting this purpose of this beautiful connection is
Mhm.
creation of life and this unitive function, a
Yeah.
man and a woman sharing their love with each other, it objectifies the female and it gets to the place where you will use her. And so
Hmm.
now, oh, I don't want to have a child, but I want to use you for my pleasures. And
Yeah.
that Pope, when he wrote Humana Vitae in 68, can't remember the year, um, everything he said would happen would happen. He said that would lead to sex outside of marriage, would lead to more abortions, would lead
Mhm.
exactly what happened.
Yep.
So the contraceptive mentality, don't contracept, know that sex create. Anyway, we got to go back to this trans thing. Your
Yeah.
book, Desist, Detrans, Detox. I think everyone should get it because if your child is not dealing with this issue, or your niece or your nephew, your neighbor's kid is. And we
Hmm.
need to be educated so we can, because they're going to come to you, especially if they're like your best friend and say, what do I do? Like your friend did. And
Yeah.
you can say, here's a book, and I've learned about it. And
Yeah.
I am, well, people can see I'm so fired up about this. Please, can you hold up the book because I don't have
Oh,
my copy in front of me?
sure, sure. There
So,
it is. Didn't they do a
desist,
nice job
detrans,
on the
detox.
cover?
What was that?
Didn't they do a nice job
I
on the
love
cover?
it. I
It
love
really,
it.
yeah,
But
I like
this,
what
you
you've done.
guys, I'd love you to go to sophiainstitute.com to get this book because you can get all these books on Amazon and everything. But when you go directly to the publisher, well, they benefit. We want them to go to this um these Christian publishers,
Yeah.
Sophia Institute.
Yeah.
So, because they are pushing out messages that are truth. Their
Yeah.
whole point in publishing is to get out truth. So I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe it'll cost you an extra dollar or two, maybe not. But
I think
sophiainstitute.com.
it's the same price at Soci
Shipping is free with Amazon sometimes. So sometimes what people will say, I get free shipping. But anyway, go
Oh,
to
that's
Sophia Institute and get your copy and get several. I always tell people get two, get one for yourself and one to give away because you're going to need to. And sure
well,
enough,
I
I've had people do that. Can I have this? I'm like, yep, got an extra.
Yeah, I am. Again, when I wrote this, I really was thinking about parents who are going through it. And then I was invited to speak somewhere, and they asked me to speak about, getting your child out. And then they said, would you also speak to parents whose kids have not gotten sucked into this yet? And I thought, oh, that's twice as much content. How am I going to do all this? But as I started processing what I was going to say, I realized it's the same message. It's the same thing. If your kids haven't gotten sucked into this yet, then you're doing this preemptively. Build up your relationship, shore up the love between you so your child knows that home is the safest place that that child can be and that truth and love are there.
And that you're
And
their greatest
cutting off
advocate.
and cutting off the bad influences and surrounding the child with good influences. That's just good parenting. That's really all it is. Now, if your child's gotten sucked into a cult, then you're doing kind of specific cutting off and specific protective functions, but it's all really just good parenting.
I am so appreciative that you got called into this, even though you're like, why me, Lord? Why me?
I know. I said, I
Because
want to be a novelist, Lord. That's
I
what I want
know.
to be.
Guess what? And then the Advocates Protecting Children.org, that's a 501(c)(3), and
It
people
is.
can donate to that as well. Is that
You would love
um
that. Yeah.
yeah, very similar because you're dealing a lot with are you dealing with more than the trans issue in the Advocates Protecting Children?
We are focusing mainly on the trans issue because it's kind of overwhelming. Um, yeah, that's we work with anyone who's trying to get resources or know how to deal with this effectively. So we work with individuals, families, churches, organizations. We've had pastors reach out to us. I had one pastor that I talked to. He said, I have been a counselor, he had a counseling degree. He said, I've been a counseling pastor for 30 years. I do not know how to counsel on this. This is so out there. And so we try to provide those resources. We have a children's ministry curriculum to teach kids in Sunday school that God made people male and female. That's it. That's all there is.
The first
Some
chapter of the
people
Bible.
yeah. I used to wonder because the Bible said God made them male and female, male and female. He
He
made
made
them all
them.
the animals, female and male. He made them male and female. I was like, okay, God, we got it.
He
But
knew
yeah,
back
he
then.
knew all those thousands of years ago that someday we would be so confused and lost, we would not know that there are only two sexes. So brilliant. I know now why God did that.
He is
Uh,
amazing.
Yes, yep. And he
Yeah.
knows this. I try to tell this to parents as overwhelming and nightmarish as this is. There is nothing new under the sun. This is just a new iteration of a very old heresy that
Oh.
people can be their own creators, which we can't. And God knew this was coming. He's not out of control. He has not lost his sovereignty, and you can get through this.
And he loves your
There's,
children more than you do. So he's going to do all he can to help,
yeah,
but you have to pay attention to him as he instructs you as well.
yep.
So, do you have any social media or places that people should follow you, or should we just send them to the advocatesprotectingchildren.org as well as
Advocates
Sophia
is
Institute?
great. Advocates is on Twitter, Facebook, Getter, Instagram, as am I, Maria Keffler. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, not Instagram. I'm not on Instagram personally, but Advocates Protecting Children is a great place to come to learn more, to get other resources. And again, we love any support people are willing to give us. The trans cult has a lot of money and they use their money to trap children. We have a little money and we're doing everything we can on a shoestring
But you have
to
a
try
lot
to
of
save
truth.
children and families.
When you have truth on your side, it trumps
Mhm.
anything that they have.
That's
You
right.
know, truth is attractive.
It
Yeah,
is, and it's what lasts.
it is. Uh, Please share this show with your friends, with your family. Let people know what's happening. Let people know what's out there. Let people know that they can get this book. But um, we have got to work in orchestra with each other's to protect each other's children. We have got to focus on our own. We've just got to not give up the fight. It's
Mm.
not going to be easy, but we need you. And I want to say to those of you who are already struggling, you are not alone. You do have organizations like Maria Keffler's. You do have people like her and like me who are like, we'll stand alongside of you. We will fight. Some of you, some of us are afraid of being judged, are afraid of people persecuting us. But there are some of us who have been persecuted enough. They're like, whatever, what can they do but chop off my head? Um,
Mm.
get yourself a courageous friend to stand with you because you're not alone, and they will hold your hand and they will say, I'm going to help you save your child or your niece or your nephew or your student. So follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, and of course my website breakfastwithbacon.com, also Rumble. We're going to start up that channel there. I already have it open and start loading some shows on it. Would love to have you follow us there, because here on this channel, we are already being watched, and anybody that speaks the truth is. And so go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter, because you will then um, get the information sent to you instead of wondering why it all of a sudden disappeared. And I
Mm.
just try to say that a little covertly, because we know that we're already having things shut down when we speak in a way that is not favorable to the cult out there. So anyway, do you remember how I end my show?
I remember.
You remember. Okay. So let me get everything here. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I want to remind you always to live your life
Sunny side up.
Amen. Sunny side up.
Amen.